All right, this is Human Development, Section C lecture. Our prioritized standards are for C, D, E, F, and G. Objectively, we're going to analyze the various stages of cognitive development. Now, cognitive development involves the emerging ability for thinking, perceiving, and remembering. So the development of this ability is actually one of the most important accomplishments of all of human development. Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget observed children's intellectual development for nearly 50 years and formulated his observations into a comprehensive theory on cognitive development. So, with his approach, he would pose a problem, observe the responses, slightly alter the situation, observe the responses again. That's pretty much how Piaget worked. Now, Piaget's theory led to a stage model of development. There are going to be three key areas that distinguish Piaget's approach, which include schemas, the interaction of assimilation and accommodation, and the stages of cognitive development. In Piaget's theory, schemas are the mental structures or programs that guide a developing child's thoughts. So Piaget argued that schemas are the building blocks of cognitive development. So schemas form and change as we develop and organize our knowledge to deal with new experiences and predict future events. So, for instance, think of some four-legged animals. Now, think of some that are friendly. Now, think of one that barks. So, generally speaking, in the first step, you're just thinking four-legged animals. So, it could be things like elephants, tigers, giraffes, cats, dogs. Lots of schemas we have for those types of things. When we narrowed it to friendly, that eliminates some options. Tigers certainly are probably going to go off the list. When I say one that barks, that's really going to narrow it down to probably namely just dogs. So again, kind of schemas, just kind of the different kind of characteristics that we use to classify certain things. So like a bird has feathers, talons, wings, and a beak as an example. In Piaget's theory, the interaction between assimilation and accommodation underlie all cognitive development, which helps make individuals' behavior and knowledge more reliant on internal thought. Now, assimilation, which is a mental process that modifies new information to fit into existing schemas, makes new information, which again makes new information fit our existing views of the world. So with assimilation, you saw this four-legged animal for the first time. Your existing schema might have been that, hey, this four-legged pet is a dog. So now they can assimilate this new information that dogs can look two different ways. So now the child will know that this is also a dog. With accommodation, this is a mental process that restructures or modifies existing schemas so that new information is better understood and incorporated. So in a sense, this kind of changes our views to fit the new information that we might have. So potentially our existing schema might be, hey, this four-legged pet is going to be a dog. So someone points out that, hey, this is a cat, though it has four legs also. So then just because something has four legs, you can realize that, okay, not all four-legged animals are actually going to be dogs. So that would be accommodation. In Piaget's theory, there are four stages of cognitive development: the sensory motor stage, which happens during infancy, the pre-operational stage that occurs in early childhood, the concrete operational stage that happens in middle childhood, and the formal operational stage that happens during adolescence. Now, at each stage, there are distinctive styles of thinking that emerge as the child progresses from sensory reaction to logical thought. Now, all children progress through the stages in the same sequence, but the time necessary to progress between stages is going to vary by the child. So that's why we have such large ranges for some of these, because you might accomplish those at different points. Now, the sensory motor stage is Piaget's first stage of cognitive development that occurs from birth to about age 2, when the child rather relies heavily on innate or inborn motor responses to stimuli. Now, children give mainly reflexive or instinctive motor responses to stimulation with very little thinking that would be involved. Now, at this stage, children are capable of simple learning, so like recognizing people they see frequently, coordinate body parts to grasp things, explore attractive objects like a rattle, or avoid things they dislike, like sour foods. A major development for later thinking and learning appears about the second year, which are known as mental representation. Now, a mental representation is the ability to form internal images of objects and events which are used in thinking and problem solving. Mental representation will evolve for everyone eventually to object permanence, which is the knowledge that objects exist independently of one's own actions or awareness, meaning things exist aside from just us. Now, the skill actually liberates the child from the present and from just their immediate surroundings. It also makes the game of peekaboo more interesting to a young child. Now, language begins to appear about this time, with words becoming another way to make mental representations. Now, the pre-operational stage is Piaget's second stage of cognitive development that occurs from about age 2 to about age 6 or 7, depending on the child, which is marked by well-developed mental representations and the use of language. At this stage, major advances include a child's emerging sense of self that is distinctive from other people and objects in their environment, and also the ability to solve simple problems using mental representations, such as seeking different places for a toy if it's not the first place you look. Features of this stage include egocentrism, animist thinking, centration, and irreversibility. So, egocentrism, this is the self-centered inability to realize that there are other viewpoints beside one's own. So at this point, this means children are not yet able to fully empathize with others or take into account others' points of view. So they have difficulty potentially sharing with others at this stage. Children may act in ways that have destructive or harmful consequences, even though they don't actually intend to upset or potentially harm others. So, like a common test that Piaget would use, he would ask them, hey, draw what the mountains must look like to your doll on your doll's point of view. So at this point, they have a really difficult time thinking about how other people might look at this. Animist thinking, this is the belief that inanimate objects have life and mental processes like people do. So at this stage, you might notice children may believe that a teddy bear or a doll might actually have real feelings. Teddy bear is thirsty. Also, another thing you're going to notice at this point is centration, which is a thought pattern involving the inability to take into account more than one factor at a time. So like a child can only center on one bit of information at a time. So if you have two glasses with an equal amount of liquid, but one glass is taller, generally speaking at this age, they're probably almost always going to think the taller glass has more liquid, even if it doesn't or it has the exact same as a different one, because they can't really consider tall, like height and width. They can't really consider both at the same time. Irreversibility, this is the inability to think through a series of events or mental operations and then mentally reverse the steps. So a child's going to have an inability to do and then undo an act in their minds. So when I was in first grade, I had a major issue. I could add 3 plus 2 equals 5. But when it came to, 5 minus 3 equals 2 then, that just completely blew my mind. It just didn't make any sense to me. So that would be an example of that. Now, the concrete operational stage is Piaget's third stage of cognitive development that occurs from about age 7 to about 11 years of age, when a child understands conservation, but still incapable of abstract thought. So at this stage, children gain the ability of conservation and the ability for performing mental operations. So conservation, this is the understanding that physical properties of an object or substance do not change when appearances change, but nothing is actually added or taken away. So at this point, you can have two glasses, you could fill it into a taller, thinner glass, and they would still acknowledge that they have the same amount of liquid. You could have a piece of clay. They could see it's the same. You could stretch it out, and then they could acknowledge that it is still the same piece of clay. You could take numbered dots, you could spread them out, and they would still know it was the same number. Now, mental operations, this means solving problems by manipulating images in one's mind. So maybe a cat's around you causes you to sneeze, so then you'll know that, hey, whenever this cat's around, I sneeze, so then you can take action to keep that from happening. Now, children overcome the problem of irreversibility, which allows them to think through a problem before taking action. That's going to make them less impulsive. Also, they're going to be less gullible. They're also going to probably give up on magical notions like Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy once they kind of mastered this level. Now, the formal operational stage is going to be Piaget's fourth stage. This is the last one of cognitive development that occurs from about age 11 and older, where the capability of abstract and complex thought appears. At this stage, children can begin to ponder introspective problems involving ways of becoming better accepted by peers and considering abstract and intangible issues, such as things like fairness, love, and reasons for existence. Now, these cognitive abilities allow adolescents and adults to approach life's problems in a way that demonstrates their ability to use abstractions and to adopt thinking strategies beyond random guesswork. Expanding on Piaget's work and believing moral reasoning was a special form of cognition, psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg developed a theory of moral reasoning, meaning your morals, known as the stages of moral development, that had a total of 6 stages that were made up of 3 levels, which included pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. And each level was going to have 2 stages. Pre-conventional level, moral reasoning, is typical of children and is characterized by reasoning that is based on rewards and punishments associated with different courses of action. So at stage 1, reasoning thinks only of reward and punishment with no concern for others. So the reasons of this moral behavior is the avoidance of pain or the avoidance of getting caught. At stage 2, while reasoning is still largely concerned with reward and punishment, there is awareness of others' perspectives. So more of a I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine type of mentality. At the conventional level, moral reasoning occurs during late childhood and early adolescence and is characterized by reasoning based on rules and expectations of society. So at stage 3, there is a desire to seek social approval and keep all parties involved happy. So decisions are going to be based on personal relationships rather than on principle. At stage 4, there's a desire to maintain the social order with a desire to follow rules and regulations. Then we're going to have the post-conventional level moral reasoning, that it's a stage where individual is going to see society's rules and expectations as relative and potentially subjective. So at stage 5, there's a social contract orientation where rules and laws are flexible and can actually be changed by social consensus or possibly by legislation. And finally, at stage 6, the basis for decisions is on universal principles of conscience that are applied to all people in all situations. All right, that concludes Human Development Section C lecture. Our prioritized standards again were for C, D, E, F, and G, and objectively now I can analyze the various stages of cognitive development.